Hello and welcome to the big fight. So the rupee's been crashing, the Sensex has been crashing, morale has been crashing, investor confidence in general is perhaps at an all-time low, certainly in the last 20 years. Just what have we done to the Indian economy? How bad are things? Is this the worst they have been for the last 20 years or so? Or are we overhyping the extent of depression that we should be in right now? And also, what is the way out of this? Because surely we don't believe, truly in our hearts, that this is the end of the India story. India will bounce back, must bounce back, should bounce back, but how can we make it do so? That is really the question that we're going to be addressing on this episode of The Big Fight, and some of the best voices to help us figure out how exactly to do this. First of all, from the political side, right here with us in the studio, we've got Piyush Goyal, MP Rajya Sabha from the Bharatiya Janata Party. Great to have you with us. Sanjay Jha, spokesperson, Congress Party, who's been, well, you know, the government obviously has to take a large share of the blame for whatever's happened in the last couple of years. Although, Piyush, I'm not going to allow you to get away completely either, especially with what's been happening in Parliament. So we're going to get both of you to have a look at it. Mohandas Pai joining us from Bangalore. One of the people who was perhaps one of the most articulate voices as the India story really started to rise, so must be completely depressed at the way things are going forward. He is, of course, the chairman now of the Manipal Global Education Services. Here with us in the studio, we have Arun Maira, member of the Planning Commission, again being really instrumental in helping craft all that's been happening in India, and certainly been talking about some of the things that he thinks we should be doing somewhat differently. Nandita Agarwal Parker is a portfolio manager with Karma Capital Management, an FII, who will presumably tell us whether you and the rest of your, well, colleagues are about to pull out of India and plunge us completely into gloom, or whether you're not going to do that. And we also have with us Mr. Sudhakar Reddy, who is the General Secretary of the CPI, who I'm sure will have a somewhat different take on all of this. Why don't I just start off with you first, Arun, actually. Is the gloom being overdone, or is the pessimism, is the sense of dismay, if not despair? What have we done to what was arguably the most powerful story just 3 years ago? Everyone was saying India is the only country which has survived the global slowdown. This is the India century, if not the India decade. This is certainly the India century, the Asia century. And today you're saying it's all over. We are finished. What's gone wrong?
Vikram, you said at the beginning that India's economy will grow, it must grow, it should grow. I think you put those words in the wrong order. We must and we should, but we will only if we do what we must and we should. And when you said, what have we done to kill the India economic story, it's not what we have done, it's what we've not done which has resulted in this problem. What we have not done is to fix the institutions of this country so that there is implementation, there is efficiency, so in the democratic decision-making processes there's consensus on new policies, and thereafter there can be implementation and efficiency in execution also. We have not attended to those things. We have talked the last few years in macroeconomic numbers and macroeconomic variables. We talk even today and we say, oh yes, our GDP is falling. Of course it is falling. We say today that the rupee is really crashing. Of course it is. We say that we are worried about our fiscal deficit, which is growing, and we should be. But there are two other numbers I think we should need to worry about most of all: the current account deficit and the inflation. Well, India is not doing that badly as the others are doing, but in terms of current account deficit as well as the inflation rate, we are doing really badly.
Okay.
Now, current account deficit is cash running out, and he's an accountant, he'll tell you that companies go bankrupt when they run out of cash first. It's not running out of the capital, okay? And this is our problem. We have not done things to fix, and we can talk about what those fixes are, which we have not done.
Okay. Nandita, let me turn to you next. The big concern that people are having is that this entire collapse of the rupee that we have seen already, and certainly the dampening of sentiments, is before FIIs have really started to pull out money from the equity market. The Sensex has crashed. FIIs have only pulled out a small amount of money so far, but $2-3 billion, maybe that. There's still hundreds of billions of dollars of FII money sitting in the Indian stock market. Are you getting the sense at all that people are going to start rushing for the exits? And also, some of the very short-term, knee-jerk steps that have been taken in the last 10, 15 days of saying, oh, well, you know, let's not send too much money abroad and let's try and control some things. Does that add to a fear psychosis? Because people rush for the doors before the doors are shut on them.
Foreign portfolio flows into this country have been very misunderstood by the government and the general public at large. In fact, this happens to be very sticky long-term money that's coming into India. And it has also been extremely patient money. And in fact, more patient than the money that, for example, went into the bond market.
It's an interesting point you're making. So you're saying that the FII money that has been coming into the Indian stock market is not in it for the short term and are not necessarily going to be selling and running away with one quarter's bad news. Is that what you're saying? That it is actually long-term patient
That's
money?
exactly what I'm saying. Despite of the short-term problems that the Indian economy is facing, the long-term picture is very intact. What bothers us, though, is that at a time like this, when there is a global event in terms of the Fed possibly tapering their bond purchases, and there is a fear globally that the Indian government is not coming together and trying to bridge the gap that needs to be bridged. So we think that the policies that are being announced reek of desperation and short-termism, and that's really something that is not very conducive in bringing in more portfolio inflows into the country. And I think that's the way we should think about this whole situation. If you were landing from the moon today, you would say, wow, this is the most undervalued currency in the world. And if we could just take care of A, B, C, and D problems, we could probably have an upside, not just from equities, but also from currency appreciation. So that's, I really want to bring this around to a question of what that A, B, C, and D might be.
So I'm going to come to the A, B, C, and D, but I think what you're saying in a sense is heartening to some extent, because you're saying if only a few basic things would be done, it's not that you could not bounce back, in other words. It is possible to bounce back and perhaps bounce back fast. And it's also heartening to hear you saying that FII money is not necessarily short-term money that's going to run for the exit.
I'm very happy to see this note of optimism, because I personally have always been an optimist, and I do believe in the India story, irrespective of the current hiccup. But I think you must go to the genesis of the problem. It's not as if we could not visualize this problem. Way back in 8 and 9, when the fiscal stimulus was given, and all of us, I think, welcomed that stimulus. The world was going through a problem. Nobody denied the government the right to give that stimulus. The problem arose when, because of vote banks and because they were trying to win an election, they went in for fiscal imprudence. And that money, instead of creating infrastructure, instead of creating assets for the future generations, was just lost in revenue. So you saw a situation, high fiscal deficits, current accounts started deteriorating, the whole world could see what's happening. We touted a 9% growth story which was completely consumption-led. Jobs were falling, again 6 crore jobs in the earlier 5 years. In 5 to 10 we saw 27 lakh jobs. The young of India have no jobs to look up to. In that situation, I think it's not only a question of fiscal and current account deficits. The real issue we need to address, which we can discuss and debate, is the deficit of vision and the deficit of leadership.
Okay. Sanjay Jha, let me turn to you next. There's a certain concern that is the government wanting to go back to an era of the past when the experience and the history of India for 60 years has shown that that's not what works. What really works is reform, freeing up the creative entrepreneurial spirits. Don't go back to policies of the past. Is that some of what we've been seeing in the last few weeks?
Let's recognize that globalization cuts both ways. As a country, we have leveraged the growth in terms of our global integration, shown in the GDP growth over the last 8 years. I mean, Piyush Goyal will have to recognize that statistics don't lie. And if during the UPA 1 we had an average GDP growth of 8.5%, and barring the last 2 years, if you average even UPA 2, have done over 7%. So on a relative scale, if you include India and China, we still have been far ahead of the pack, and that cannot happen if many things are not going right in the country. But you know, there is a downside here, I think, as the lady from the FII said, that today, with the Fed really kind of easing, kind of bringing a stop to quantitative easing, the truth is that all emerging market economies, I mean, the numbers are staggering. You had roughly around 4 trillion dollars flowing into the emerging markets. They're all going back. And that's the reason why you have had this sudden,
I don't think
depreciation
if
of the
we
rupee.
tell any of these kids about what's happening there, they are concerned,
Mr.
they are
Goyal,
looking
Mr.
at
Goyal,
India
if you don't
today.
interrupt me, this has been the trigger for the depreciation of the rupee. Now, the reason, and we need to
I beg
acknowledge
to
that.
differ
The good
here.
news-
Actually,
the good
Sanjay,
news
I'm not
is-
sure.
Can I finish?
Yeah, finish what you're saying.
Just let me finish, Vikram. See, the good news is that American economy seems to be on a recovery. As a result of that, as you can see, if you compare India with Brazil, with the Brazilian currency, or with any of the other Asian and emerging market economic currencies, they have all depreciated. India has taken a bit of a bigger hit, and I'll tell you the second reason behind that. The second reason behind that, and there's no denying that on the current account deficit, we do have a bit of a challenge, because a large component of that is really into oil and gold, which we all need to agree are not going to be really triggers of growth in the domestic economy. So that's the reason why the finance minister has been doing his road shows to attract more foreign direct investment. I'm happy to hear the FI say they're sticky, but let me tell you, we had an FI outflow of roughly $12 billion.
Sanjay, what really worries me-
It's not $2 billion, it's $12 billion that flew out through FI.
I'm talking about
so whether
equity
we need to
versus debt.
bring
A lot of the money, Sanjay, a lot of the money that went out was from the debt funds, not from equity. From debt funds, money has gone because
10
yes,
billion.
the US interest rates are rising. So debt money will flow out. FII equity money hasn't really started to flow
Actually,
out
they are
yet.
stuck. They
Hasn't
cannot
really
go
started
out
to
at
flow
this
out.
rupee.
But can I just say, Sanjay, hang on.
But Vikram,
Sanjay, one
but
sec.
Vikram,
What worries me is if we are going to
that
take,
we need
if
to
we are
bring
going to,
about some structural reforms, and for that I would include land acquisition, GST, etc. I mean, these are fundamentals.
I
to
agree,
How is
and I
land
agree, and I wish we
acquisition
could
going to
those parts.
improve
But can I,
the job situation?
one at a
It's
time.
in fact going to kill industrialization the way they have drafted it. The land acquisition is only getting more complicated.
But Sushma Swaraj is the one who put the final touches
So
to it.
we had to amend it because they were doing retrospective land acquisition changes. We have actually at least brought some sanity into it. The original law as the government proposed would have killed even existing projects. They would have all come to a standstill.
Vikram, may I please?
Okay.
I requested you, and please, that we have to look at the fundamental solution and we must agree on them. This about who is responsible, I mean, this tutu meh meh.
Arun, can I just get everyone, can I get everyone else, can I just get everyone to understand the nature of the
talk
problem?
about the country and not about who's responsible for the current problem.
Fair
Thank
enough,
you.
but we'll come to the solution, but
But
I'll
Arun, obviously, if a government is in power and if they have misgoverned for 9 years, they will have to take responsibility. The
I'm
onus
sure,
is
but
on the
I would
government.
like to know that the solutions that you're thinking
I will
about
be
are what
very,
I
very
believe are the
delighted.
fundamental solutions.
I will be delighted to give you
So
Can we
we need to
first,
know that
no, but I
also.
think it's important to first understand what the problem is, because, and I have a concern, I have some concern, Sanjay, with what you said, because if we don't understand what the problem
Yes.
is, and if we blame everything on the foreign hand, and yes, the Americans did it in the 60s, we used to say everything is being done by the CIA and it's
Pakistan.
entirely because of bonds. If we don't understand the nature of the problem, we're not going to be able to fix it. So let me
Absolutely.
first I'm going to ask Mohandas Pai to come in now on the nature of the problem. Mohan,
When we were growing at 8.5%, our investment rate was 37% of GDP, our savings rate was 35% of GDP. Now in the composition of our GDP, 35% has been the average investment level and 65% is consumption. In the last 3 years, inflation cumulatively has been 33%, so consumption has fallen down in this country. Investment has come down from about 37% to 30%. Savings, which are 35% of GDP, have come down to 28%. So the policies of government, which was to spend money on subsidies, non-priority expenditure, has increased inflation, reduced the savings of the people of this country. Investment has come down. Now, as far as investment coming down, the starting point was Jairam Ramesh extremist views on environment, which destroyed the industrial climate. Then the retrospective amendment of the tax laws, which Government of India went back 50 years to 1961 to amend this law to say to foster liability for sale of an asset within India, and the consequent amendments. And because of this retrospective impact and the way government behaved itself, confidence of the investor class within India and outside India was lost. Where investment is an act of faith, and therefore investment as a percent of GDP has come down. Now this Land Acquisition Act and all the things means that there has been no decision making. Now the paralysis in Parliament and the policy paralysis has meant that in power, in the road area and in the coal area, things have not moved forward. So investment has come down. And let me give you an example, Vikram. Last year, I was in Seattle addressing the Pacific Pension Institute. There was $12 trillion in the room. $12 trillion is not funny money. After my presentation, I told them, will you invest in India? Not one hand went up. I asked why. They said, if a government can go back and retrospectively amend the law going to 1961, how can we trust you? Tomorrow there is no rule of law in this country. You go against the judgment of the Supreme Court, you amend the law, and you want us to come and invest, we don't trust you at all. So there's a crisis of confidence for investment in this country, and that is the root cause of what you see today.
I actually tweeted that. I said that, we can go on blaming whomever we want to blame, but I can give you almost the exact date when foreign investors lost confidence and lost faith in India, and that was on the day of the budget, when we came out with a retrospective, that retrospective tax, which completely and totally made everyone worry. Well, you know the date exactly. I know it was the budget day, 8th of March. That was the date when things started to go wrong. So, frankly, Sanjay, I think the point to be made is, it's not just that the environment is tricky externally, it is, but perhaps not as tricky as it was 3-4 years back. I think the real problem is the number of own goals that we have scored. Retrospective tax was an old goal. Some of the other steps that we have taken are an own goal. Not allowing industry and not giving clearances, not having coal for power plants. These are own goals. These are stuff that we have done. Let's not blame the rest of the world for that.
Just one addition you're missing out.
Let
You're
me tell
completely
you,
missing
Vikram,
out corruption.
Let me get Sanjay.
One thing,
Corruption and
amongst other things.
Okay,
That
corruption.
kills investor sentiment. Because let's say we get a license, an Indian government gets a license. We don't know if it's an honest license or it could be struck down by the court. They get coal blocks based on which they hope to invest. And then they come to know, no, the process was vitiated.
Or telecom licenses for that matter, which were then cancelled. So yes, so we've done a lot of damage. Sanjay, you want to respond, then I'll get done with time. Yeah, Sanjay.
Mohandas Pai made a statement about Jairam Ramesh, taking some stringent decisions looking at the environment. But the truth is, a lot of the projects, including coal mines that could not be excavated, Vikram, were on account of complexities of environment. You do need clearances, they do impact the tribal population. It's not something that we can be so insensitive about. But to answer your question, I think the real concern for India that we have acknowledged even as a government is the fact that today manufacturing, it has remained stagnant for too long at around 16% of the GDP contribution. And China has really taken the story away. We are strong in services, but I think India needs to get that manufacturing story back. And as a government, therefore, a lot of people say that we haven't cleared projects, but when the Prime Minister mooted the National Investment Board, there are I can give you the statistics on that, there are a lot of highways being done on the Bharat Nirman. The numbers are amazingly high. Also, we have cleared roughly 65,000 crore of projects for urban infrastructure. Now, the
Arun Maira is shaking his head vigorously.
A lot of the decisions you take, there is a time lag. I'll give you an example. FDI in multi-brand retail, you're not going to get Walmart on day one or Costco.
Because the rules that they were notified were so awful that nobody wanted to invest. And you had to change the rules. 1 year later, the rules could have been made simpler earlier. If you did not want 50% to be invested in back-end, irrespective of what the size was, it could have been stated on day one. By now the money would have started to flow in. You may not have had a foreign exchange crisis.
No, Vikram, first 2 minutes.
But Vikram, let me tell you, do you know the signal that the
after that they could not create a...
I'm going to come to the signal.
And all that they did was a cabinet committee which
has cleared 1 lakh
out of 7 lakhs.
That if they were to come to power, which is in my opinion a pipe dream, but they said if we come to power, we will actually annul if the FDI in multi-brand retail, we will take it back.
They are in power in Gujarat, where all the manufacturers are going, and all the FDI is going.
Okay, we've spent a happy 15 minutes slamming the government for everything that they've done wrong. And they've done lots wrong. So now can I just ask you though, as a principal opposition party though, right now is not necessarily the time to be playing party politics only. Yes. There is an India story that is at stake right now. It's the future of the country. It's the future of all of these people. The future of 1 billion people is also at stake. Sometimes is the BJP also taking party politics a bit too far and not necessarily doing what is right for the country. And I'm talking just a couple of things. One, what he said. Yes, it is true that the BJP made statements saying, if we come to power, we will reverse this decision, which really frightened foreign investors even more. Why would Walmart come in and invest billions if the BJP comes to power and overturns it? And secondly, I think, and I'm going to get everyone to talk about this, what has been happening in Parliament for the last 6 months or 9 months has been a shame, and it's been a national shame. Right. We cannot have a situation where the Parliament of the country is just not allowed to function, no matter what the grievances are. If we set this as the precedent that look, we will not allow Parliament to function because we have a grievance, it's going to continue. Next year, if you come to power, Congress will do the same to you. You're talking about Gujarat, day after tomorrow, the opposition party there can say, we won't allow the assembly to function. So on these areas are stuff I think the BJP and other opposition parties also need to look at.
First of all, regarding the statement of reversing the laws if we come into power, which may happen in 3 months, 6 months, whenever, I am on record on your channel, the NDTV, the day Anand Sharma announced the amendments in the FDI. I am on record in which I said I welcome the fact that this government has finally started acting. A. I welcome the fact that they moved things from FIPB to automatic route. We believe in minimum government, maximum governance. We don't want government to interfere in each approval. Third, I oppose the telecom 100% because I feel in the interest of national security, there should be some Indian involvement. You can't hand over telecom, which tomorrow snoops on all of us.
Okay.
Hang on, let me finish. So, and on that show, I made a categorical assurance to investors. I said I appeal to investors. It's on record, YouTube it. I said I appeal to investors, don't wait for the elections. Please invest now. The country needs foreign exchange. I have given an assurance. The BJP has never done a retrospective amendment. The BJP will not throw out anybody who has come in based on the law of the land as it stands today. We respect the judicial process. I said this on your show. So as far as reversal is concerned, what we can do is, when we come into power, let me make it clear, we can change policy prospectively, which is the prerogative of every government. That's as far as the reversal. As regards Parliament, tell me, with the series of scams, with the way 2G was mishandled by this government, that till we stalled Parliament, even the CBI investigation was in a limbo for 1 year. It's only when we stalled Parliament, when lakhs of crores of the common man's money is being squandered away, that we have to bring the angst of the people before the House. We wanted answers, and that is why the investigation started. Colgate, much before the CAG report came. 2 years ago, I have said on the floor of the House, it's a $100 billion loss. India need not have had a fiscal deficit.
Can I interrupt you?
No, you cannot. Listen, Vikram.
Excuse me, hang on 1 second.
No, Vikram. You wanted an answer, I'm specifying.
I'm asking.
The people of India wanted answers. The government shields behind. The government shields behind blaming the opposition.
Yes.
The fact is, it is my duty as opposition to raise the angst of the
Yes,
people.
of course it
and
is.
finally,
Of course.
Gujarat, though we run the government, they cannot disrupt. And when I come to power, they cannot disrupt. I will not give them a cause for disruption.
You can disrupt it.
I will run an honest government.
TDP.
I will run an honest government where there will be no cause for disruption.
Piyush, 1 second. It has nothing to do with honesty.
It is everything to do with honesty.
No, it's not only got to do with honesty.
Tell me what
because once
issue we have raised.
Can I just 1 sec? Let me finish. It's not only you. You've had a situation the last 2-3 weeks where 4 MPs, 4, count them, 4 MPs.
No, incidentally, the Congress is stalling government.
Yes, Congress,
not us.
Fine, I know. I am going to come to the Congress also. Congress is now wanting to suspend its own MPs. Congress is wanting to suspend its own MPs for
So let them
disrupting Parliament,
take the
which is
blame for
fascinating.
disrupting Parliament, not
They want, you're in a bizarre situation right now where the Congress wants to suspend its own MPs and you're saying you can't do that, which I find
That's because it's only a precedent. Tomorrow they'll suspend me, so I have to understand that.
Aha. But now I'm saying,
the fact
if
is,
4
we have
MPs,
only
can I
gone
ask,
for
one second,
corruption.
can I ask you, can I ask this, the crowd out here?
Piyush, give us a chance.
I'm asking all of you a question. Whatever the justification there is, let's assume that Piyush is saying is correct, and these are really important issues of major concern to the nation. Do any of these issues justify Parliament being disrupted and not being allowed to function? Who feels, so is there any person here who feels that Parliament should be disrupted? There you are.
By the way, the public money invested in running Parliament is a few crores.
This is what the people feel. Yeah, let me hear his views.
Whatever is the issue, there cannot be a stop dialogue.
My
The
friend,
dialogue
we are
has to
not
be a
stopping.
continuous dialogue.
We are asking
You
you
are
to
stalling the
respond.
Parliament. No, it's fine. As an opposition, it's your duty. You are doing a very good job. But why stopping the Parliament?
We are
Have a
not
dialogue.
stopping. We are
Have a
asking them
discussion.
to respond.
Talk with them, You
We are
cannot just
asking
stop
them to
this,
respond. Where is the
Like
money?
as we are debating today in this show, we are very happy. You are putting your point, I am putting my point, he is putting his point. It's a very nice thing. So we need to talk.
Arun.
See, I want to come back. She said ABC. Let's come to ABC, okay? You talked about, the last few weeks, and then you went back to 8th March, a year ago. Actually, the problem was long before that. Let me tell you, 3 years ago, when the World Economic Forum met in Bombay, they had about 900 or 1,000 people. Now, those people were not FIIs. They were people who were companies in India. They're investors. They've been running companies in India for years. Okay, they got an experience of India. They were Indian investors, I mean Indian company executives and owners, promoters, who are also investing abroad, by the way. Bharat Forge, for example. At the end of the 3 days, they had asked the 7 people who were the co-chairs of the World Economic Forum to summarize what they had heard from these 900 people to give a message to the Indian government. And I was asked in the closing plenary on behalf of the Indian government to receive this message from people who are the real investors, creators of jobs. Okay? They run companies. And they said, we would like to give an A and a B, and that's all to the Indian government. That was, as I said, 3 years ago. This was at the time of the Anna Hazare movement and all that. What is on the minds of citizens
And what was
also?
the A and
I'll
B?
tell you the A and the B. The A was that you please get the coal to move to the power plants. It's not a matter of getting more investments in power plants. You're not running the power plants that you have. And the investments made by people, they're lying fallow. You're not going to get more investments in infrastructure by asking people to come. The people who are here and have been here say, we are stuck. Get the coal moving. And that was just a way of saying, get things to move in your country. A. It doesn't require parliament or any debate in parliament. B, please, and this was 3 years ago, in that session of parliament which you'll remember, they said, please get some law passed, some institutional change made, which will get the people of this country's confidence that you're doing something about corruption. Because what they said, no foreign investor is going to trust a government which is not trusted by its people, especially in a democracy. You've got to win the trust of your people. So we are talking about winning the trust of investors, but the root cause is, if we don't win the trust of our people, there's no way.
I think, Arun, absolutely
And
well
Mr.
put. And I tell you,
Moose,
let me interpret that further. Let me interpret that further, Arun. I think you're bang on. And if you look at the things that people are saying, just make sure that you're doing basic governance. Getting coal moving is not the end of the world. And number two, at least have a certain amount of faith in institutions. Actually, that does bring us back to the parliament point. I remember during the Anna Hazare movement, all of us in TV studios and others, we used to attack the people who used to say, no, parliament is nothing, politicians are nothing, we will decide. We said, no, parliament is supreme. But in the years that have followed, when parliament is not functioning, what
By
You
the way,
think
who
that-
stalled the
Piyush.
Lokpal bill?
No, Piyush,
You're forgetting
please,
that
whoever
famous
stalled-
midnight 12th,
No, Piyush.
31st of December.
Piyush, whoever's
when
doing
the
it,
Congress
please.
government stalled the Lokpal
Please,
bill.
okay.
Please,
With one
please,
man.
May I?
please allow me
With
just
one
one
man.
last thing.
Arun, let
Allow me
Arun
one
finish.
last thing. Today, as Piyush noted, all the parliamentarians are very happily passing a bill that a member of parliament cannot be disallowed from being elected if there's a case against him. All united, it's a very calm debate. Okay? It's a very calm debate. All of them were then united, all the parties, that parliament is supreme. The people, you shut up and don't make a noise about these things. But in this day and age, with all these shows that you have and people participating, and YouTube that he's pointing to, people are aware of what is going on. They want to be heard. They want to participate in the democratic discourse. They don't say, close us off for 5 years because we've elected you and you debate.
Or don't
We want to
which is worse.
participate. Our parliamentarians have got to get used to having people engaged all along. Not saying once you've elected us, you leave it to us.
And if
Please.
nothing else, at least engage with each other and talk to each other in parliament. Sudhakar Reddy, what is the nature of the problem right now, the crisis that we are facing?
This is the inevitable consequence of the neoliberal economic policies that are pursued by the government of India for the last two decades. There is a crisis in USA, there is a crisis in Europe, and inevitably that had its effect on India also. This is the type of problems. I believe the current account deficit could have been removed, it could have been reduced if the 5 lakh odd crores of rupees that are given as concessions to the corporate houses in the country in the last budget, this type of problem would not have been there. I am more worried than the rupee fall about the price rise of the onions, about the vegetables, about the edible oils, about the food grains.
Okay.
This is the problem the people are facing. The government is not ready to take any step.
All right.
I agree
Arun,
with him.
I think this is
I
the
agree with him for one reason.
inevitable consequence of
Sanjay
the-
Jha said manufacturing is our problem. It is the core problem. Because our current account deficit has 3 components. One is the gold, which is a temporary thing because people have lost confidence in the economy. So if you get confidence, the gold problem will get eased. and you can find other temporary solutions of, bonds against gold and so on against that. The second is oil, petroleum, and if our economy is to grow, which we want it to grow, we're going to have to improve petroleum. We don't have enough for a growing economy here. The third one is manufactured imports and insufficient manufactured exports. As our economy has been growing, we've been freely allowing imports to come in, and okay, I won't use the word so aggressively, neoliberal policies, but since 1991, we have followed a policy of opening up everything to the market.
Okay.
But during that period, we lost out the manufacturing story. So how is it that manufacturing is growing slower than the economy since that time? It used to grow faster previously. And China has grown its manufacturing greatly, and it's not allowed itself to be pushed around by multinationals' views on what China should do. They have strengthened it during that period. We have recognized in the last 3 years by involving all the stakeholders, both foreign companies and Indian and the governments and the state governments in particular, what do we need to do to get manufacturing to grow? Quite apart from current account deficit, the jobs. We need the jobs. We need 100 million more jobs through manufacturing. And we've got just 4 or 5 million over the last 10 or 15 years, Piyush. And this is a terrible story in terms of the...
One small point.
Let me just get Mohandas Pai.
One small point to add to him. Gujarat is in the same country where all these other states are. It's in the national region. Gujarat has the lowest unemployment at 1% as per government statistics. Gujarat has very high manufacturing growth, and it's the only state which is growing in agriculture, manufacturing and services, despite all these problems. And the only reason is people trust that leader. Bharosa makes all the difference. So if only they get the Bharosa right, I think India can also have manufacturers coming.
Mohandas Pai, let me get you in on that. Somewhere along the way, did we lose sight that at the end of the day, you need to have factories, you need to have manufacturing, and you need to get people into those factories because that's where the jobs will come from?
We need manufacturing because manufacturing alone can create the large-scale jobs for something which is tangible and to export. And let me say this, in the last 4 years, it has become extremely difficult to start an industry. You will not get environment approval easily. Even for a small factory of 2 acres, 3 acres, you have to pay bribes to get approval. There is no power in the system because we got 50,000 megawatts of power plants and no coal. And this year we're importing $20 billion of coal. On top of that, our supply chain and logistics is gone. Our custom formalities are horrible to import anything and to export everything. And overall, the corruption system has gone up, and we have come with an approval Raj. Now we have to go to Delhi more times than we ever did in the last 10 years. In the last 5 years, you got to go to Delhi more times than ever did for 15 years before that. Everything has come to an approval, everything they made a law, everything they tightened up is so difficult. So nobody wants to invest in India. And we've seen Arun's policy, the policy is a good policy, but the policy has got no relation with reality on the ground. Reality on the ground is so very difficult and so very tough. In my state of Karnataka, Karnataka was the third in manufacturing about 7 years back. Now we slipped to the 7th. Why? Because you don't get land, you don't get approvals you don't get power, there is corruption in everything, and people are just giving up. I mean, look, there is a deficit of governance, and unless you fix all these issues and make a pro-industry policy and remove the influence of the NAC and all those do-gooders who come and ruin this country and make sure none of the people in your studio will have a job in the next 2-3 years. I mean, what Jairam Ramesh did by shutting down everything, nobody's opening factories, there are no jobs, Sir Vikram. What are the young people going to do in the next 2-3 years?
Okay.
So you should ask the audience, like you asked them earlier, what they feel about corruption, about misgovernment.
I'm sure they have very strong views. Who in this audience thinks that corruption is a good thing? I mean, I know what they're going to say. So anyway, hang on.
I think that one point I want to make.
There are companies that you invested in which are presumably, are all of them telling you that, look, this is how tough life has suddenly become for us?
Life is very uncertain, I would put it that way. When all of this has happened, the opposition and the government leadership is not coming together and putting their heads together and saying, okay, let's put the country first. Let's put the country first.
You mentioned about opposition. I have often said to the government, there are 100 things to do in this country. 98 of them, there's unanimity, including the left, all parties. They don't focus on those 98. They bring the 1 or 2 most contentious issues to the fore and completely disrupt the national discourse. After all, we lost days on end on multi-brand retail. Not $1 has come in. Instead of that, if Pulak Chatterjee could have come out with this coal report, instead of in 16 months, in 3 months, which was the targeted time they had given him, instead of that, if they could have focused on clearing 7 lakh crores of projects, which are acknowledged by all, instead of that, if they could have sorted out issues with Vodafone, with with Shell, with Nokia, with IBM. Every foreign company today is being raided. Nokia was raided. Every company has huge tax demands. Who wants to come to India? An IBM executive has told me, we are giving 100,000 jobs in India. We are now looking at a rollback. This is the state of the nation. Forget new jobs. These kids are going to lose existing jobs the way things are going.
Okay.
How can you expect revenue targets to be met in a falling economy?
So Sanjay, there does seem to be a sense of a return to license, Raj, and it comes through where it's on a, corruption is a different issue, but yes, corruption is also causing it. But the approvals, the headache, the hassles, the tax rates, the changing policies, all of that is what has really contributed to vitiate the atmosphere, and for that, the government really has nobody to blame but itself.
If you really follow what some of the leading CEOs of the world, a lot of foreign investors, they are not as bearish on India as some of our own people are. But the truth is we are living in extremely dynamic times. Now we cannot ignore the reality that at this point, even as we talk, I mean, it's easy to talk about corruption. There is an RTI which has been passed. There is a Lokpal which we hope will get passed in Parliament, hopefully sooner or later. But there's no denying it's very easy for Piyush Goyal to make these sanctimonious statements to your viewers. But the truth is, we are somewhere paying a price for obstructionist politics. The government's policy of inclusive growth has to look at the stock market. It has to appeal to the corporate sector. I think the corporate sector is vital to create a lot of private investment. That's fundamental to our growth. We can't deny that. We also got to carry the last sections of India, which actually cannot be, if they are not carried, the India story by itself is half-baked.
Sanjay, I think the real frustration is coming not because people are bearish on India itself. I think a lot of people are convinced, I certainly personally am, I think most people are, that there is not a country in the world which probably has more potential over the next 50 years than India does. I think the frustration comes because we are blowing it up by doing all sorts of dumb things which we shouldn't be doing. That's the reason for the frustration. If we were bearish about India, if we thought India didn't have hope, you know, I think everyone would not be as frustrated as they are right now. Nandita, do you agree with me on that?
I'm chiming in with you, Vikram. I mean, the food security ordinance at a time like this, when you really need to tighten your belts instead of spend money that we don't have.
That's more contentious because you can. That's his point is that you have to take the poor with you, and so food security bill, I may or may not agree with you.
That's all right. You may not agree with me, but the fact of the matter is that you ought to spend what you have, and we're not doing that. And in fact, not only are we not doing that in the short term, but also in the longer term, it's tying up the future governments to a bill that they may not, commitments they may not be able to make.
But making sure that every Indian does not go hungry. Sudhakar Reddy, let me just get you in on this point.
I think the food security bill is must. It should come in this parliament. Only thing is we want that it should be universal food security system instead of APL, BPL.
Mohan, you were quickly trying to say something.
Vikram, we all want poor people to have food, but 65% of India is not poor. They only say that 22% of people live below the poverty line, they need help. Poverty has come down from 31%, 22%. Now they want to give the food security bill 65%. This is a joke. And 65% don't require this help, they require jobs. They require investment, they require income earning opportunities. They want to eat vegetables, they want to eat some fruits, not rice.
Spy has not understood what the food security bill is all about. What we are doing is the poverty line is one part, but what the government is saying, the right to food should be made universal. We have taken it as a first step to 3 times that multiple. It is something that we should feel proud of. It doesn't mean, at this point we are not doing it at the wrong time.
I don't think I can
It's high time we got some action from this government, not one more entitlement. Let's empower these people with jobs.
We need action. Okay, can I ask the audience what they think about all this? I'm going to take a break. Let me turn to the audience then. I'm going to final comments from all of our panelists when we return. Welcome back to the big fight. Let me turn again to the audience. And I did some unscientific snap polling earlier. Let me ask you some more unscientific snap polling. How many of you are still confident that eventually, within 5 years to 10 years, the Indian economy will be absolutely fine? How many of you are confident of that?
10 years. Yes, Vikram.
Okay, that's at least 70-80%, which is not bad.
Why can't we simplify things?
Why can't we stop slamming each other and take some action? Can I shake you by the hand on that? Right. Sorry, let me give some other people
My question, Mr. Mohandas has just said that crisis of confidence.
And that's why the investment is not coming up in India. There is another thing, 5% growth rate, nobody is going to come. But my question is, what is your policies, what is your approach, and what is your strategy to deal with the situation? You are taking ad hoc approach for every situation.
Okay.
Even the corruption, even the Lokpal bill,
I'm
they are
allowed
not
to
doing
speak on
anything.
that.
I'm going to ask you, Piyush, in just a second. The gentleman there.
The government has passed the bill that taxing super rich would benefit the economy or some kind of...
Okay, we'll wait for that. Okay, I'm going to come to all of you and I'm going to ask you for something very specific. We've all heard many of the long-term solutions. Yes, we know we have to fix corruption, we have to get manufacturing fixed, we have to do all of those things. They are all obvious points, but you know, for some reason the government is not acting on them. Can I ask you all for some immediate short-term fixes? What do we do immediately? What should the government do in the next week, 10 days? Because as I started by saying, a lot of the stuff they're doing seems to be backfiring and backfiring spectacularly. Nandita, what would you do? What would you like to see the government doing in the next 1 week?
I think changing the tax laws to make it very easy for foreign institutional investors to move their offices to India, move the whole decision making to India, and making those offshore funds tax free will go a long way, and I can assure you will bring in billions of dollars into India and at least 20 to 30,000 jobs right now. I think
this can be done really fast?
It can be done very fast because it doesn't require any legislative action. It doesn't require the opposition's agreement. It's something that the executive can do, change that, make a minor change and get on with it.
Vikram, I think, are always saying, let's find a short-term solution, or the long-term things, we know what they are, but we don't apply ourselves to fixing them. You're again falling into the trap and making us all fall into the trap. I refuse to go into the trap.
So you're saying only worry about the long-term thing?
Because we haven't attended to them, and we keep on with this. In the 80s, it was believed that Japan was going to be larger than the US in this century. No one talked about China in the 80s, if you recollect. Just talking about the economic factors, you can't project what's going to happen in the country. So we in the 2007, the World Economic Forum and us, many of us in India, we developed scenarios for India to work out what are the fundamentals that need to be fixed so that we can get sustainable growth. And we want inclusion in the growth, of course. We want a sustainable fiscal situation, of course, and a current account situation, of course. That analysis showed that if we don't fix the institutions, then it said that by the year 2012, India's growth rate will be 6% or less. So I say again, I'm not interested in talking about what we have to do for the next few days. I'm saying what we need to do in the next few days is get ourselves, like these people are saying, please, let's get a consensus on the solutions. Let's talk about the longer term solutions. We're ignoring them too long. Their jobs are dependent on getting the long-term solutions now.
Mr. Sudhakar Reddy, what are some of the solutions that you would put into place immediately?
Gold import should be restricted more. If possible, it should be banned for a few months. There should be tax on the windfall profits, and all efforts should be made to give power supply properly, improve the industrial production and mining.
Okay.
These are the things that will help more employment potentiality should be increased.
Mohandas Pai, what would you do? You're the Prime Minister tomorrow.
Vikram, if I am the Prime Minister tomorrow, I will roll back the retrospective amendment of tax and assure people will not do retrospective amendments. Second, 1,50,000 crores of frivolous transfer pricing claims have been made in industry for the last 3 years. Every industry is pissed off, to use a bad word, and I would roll it back and set up a commission to settle all that in the next 3 months. Third, I will allow the free sale of gold by Indian citizens to create a local supply and remove the capital gains in gold, so we don't have to import gold, and people in this country who hold 25,000 tons of gold can freely sell it without tax. Fourth, I'll solve the power problem and the coal problem, the road problem by taking certain decisions so that industry can be useful again. And fifth, I'll talk to the RBI and reduce interest rates and make sure that people feel good, because interest rate has become a contention, it has become a perception. So I will work on improving the sentiments and take up the reforms that Arun said, because if we don't do the long term, the short terms will fizzle out in the next 3 months.
Mohandas Pai, where can I vote for you? Can we? Okay, so anyway, excellent suggestions, I think, which we can try and put into them. Sanjay Jha, do you agree with any of those steps, and is there any hope at all that we'll see some of those steps in action?
In light of Vikram, I'll make sure that Mohandas Pai is not the Prime Minister of India, because his suggestion to reduce the interest rate actually goes contrary to the current decisions. If you have to actually raise the interest rate to reduce inflation so that the depreciation of the currency doesn't get worse. So I think that's one fact, but we can talk about it some other time. The most important thing that we are doing
that's
at
a
the
very
moment,
contentious
Vikram,
line. To say that you should go on increasing interest rates to defend the currency is not
It hasn't
necessarily a
worked.
policy that's worked
Well,
around the
hasn't
world.
worked.
India is following the right policy of inclusive growth. I think Mr. Myra hit the nail on the head when he said that while you can talk economics, you have to consider the social implications of every decision. We have today 56 or 60 billionaires in India. We have also got 60,000 slums. So Indian growth story, Vikram, should never be talked about in terms of the Sensex and just the the high net worth individuals. We have to look at the 700 million people as well. That's a governmental responsibility, and I think we are on the right track.
Okay. Piyush, final thoughts from you.
Well, first of all, what Mohandas said is something I have been agitating for the last 3 years with this government to do, and I fully second every one of his suggestions. As regards Sanjay, I'd just like to read out one line from a speech the finance minister gave in 1947 when India became independent. And I quote, "The supply of goods, the present inflation is not due to further increase of currency, but to a steady fall in the supply of goods."
There you are.
They knew it in 47, but for 60 years when they have ruled, they messed the country. It is necessary to bring down interest rates. We need to tackle inflation by supply side, not by compressing demand and compressing manufacturing. And they also said in 47, and I quote again from Shanmugam Shetty, "If the economy of this country is to be placed on a sound footing and maintained in a healthy condition, it is of the utmost importance to increase internal production."
Okay.
What we need to do is set manufacturing right. So I have 3 simple mantras. Give people skills. What Narendra Modi says, skill, speed and scale. I think it's high time the country started thinking big, thinking fast and thinking in terms of empowering them with skills.
Okay.
Second, we'll believe in minimum government, maximum governance. What you wanted to know my policy. I believe government has to get out of people's lives, make it easy to do business. We don't want everybody all the time harassed by government bureaucracy. We want the 15 lakh crores that the government spends every year as per last budget, not going away in non-planned, useless expenditure, but focusing on creating infrastructure, creating assets, which is what the NDA did. The capital growth in our time was about 3 times what it is now. We used to spend about 22% of the budget on infrastructure creation. This government has brought it down to half. Today only 11% of the budget is spent on infrastructure.
Very short closing
comments. And a last thing, if at all you want 2 concrete suggestions in the long term, as Arun said, A, we need to focus on tourism, which is going to be a big income earner, both Indian and forex, and B, we need to make affordable housing.
Of a young girl and the experiences she had.
So we have to sort out those issues. That's what government's job is, not to mess around. And second is, we have to focus on affordable housing and give a boost to construction industry, which will give jobs to the people and encourage more manufacturing.
More on that in your speech. If and when you do become the finance minister, we will hear more on all of this stuff. Piyush, but can I just ask you, we're talking about the immediate short term, can we expect Parliament to function next week?
Well, if the government does not create another scam and another corruption issue and then try to hide the scam by suddenly making files to disappear,
okay, I got my answer.
Then of course Parliament can function.
I got my answer. All right, so sadly no immediate signs of a breakthrough on that particular front. Let's hope we can actually find some of the answers and the solutions that we do need. 1.2 billion people do deserve their future to be what it can and should very easily be. I agree with you, Arun. It's not necessary that the future will be what it can be, but if we do a few simple short steps which are very much in our hands, I think that the entire situation can change around and turn around. So let's hope that we do actually take some of those steps. You've been watching The Big Fight. We'll be back next week.